say the game is getting old. Monday morning and your coffee's cold. Life is not what you want it to be.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to A New Direction. My name is Jay Izzo, and ho, 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 he's back. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am, he sure is. Dr. Michael J. Colburn, the #1 downloaded show in the history of A New Direction, returns. He comes back. We go, where has he been? Where is he? You know what you do is you call Dr. Michael up on the phone and you go, hey, I'm in a bind here. Would you mind wanting to do a part 2 of the show? I get this email back. Sure, I've got time. I'm actually a little busy, but it happens to be when your show's on, I'm free. I'm like, oh yeah, it's bigger than me because he's bigger than me. He's Dr. Michael Colburn. The book, Own Your Job. Folks, I want to tell you something about this book. Now, the title says Own Your Job. I know, 3 words, right? But here's the thing. Whatever job you have, whatever your title of your job is, right? You can lead. You can lead, and you should be leading. You should be leading from your job. I don't care what it is. I don't care what you do. I don't care how old you are. You should be leading from your job. And I know what you're going to say. But I'm just a. Listen to me, you just us. Okay, for just a second here. All right? You're not just a. You have a huge purpose in this life, and that's what we're going to talk about today, right? But before we get to Michael, let's do this, right? We're talking about our training, right? Hey, listen, 4 areas of our life: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. You know the drill, right? How is your training going, right? Because we're all in training right now, physically. Scale of 1 to 10, 1's miserable, 10's outstanding in your training. And if I ask you physically, how would you rate your training this past week? Right, on a scale of 1 to 10. And you say, well, I don't know what you mean by training. You meaning just exercise? No, I'm not meaning just exercise. I'm talking about getting enough sleep, drinking enough water, eating the right things, right? That's what I'm talking about physically, right? I mean, and then when it comes to your exercise, I'm not talking about doing crazy stuff in your exercise. I'm talking about moderate exercise, getting out, taking a walk, maybe doing a few push-ups. Stretching is great, right? So if you were to rank your physical self in that area of training, how would you rate yourself, right? 5's average, right? Hold on to that number, right? Second number, let's talk about your mental training, right? Do you know what is not mental training? Watching the news and watching TV is not mental training. Because you know what that makes you? That makes you a mental loafer. Okay? Because you see, you're not being an active participant in your mental training. You are not growing by watching the TV and the news. That's not growth. You want to know what growing is? Picking up a book, reading it, and then wait for it, apply it to your life. That's mental growth. And I don't care what the book is. It could be a book on your business. It could be a book on a number of other things. It could be your marriage. It could be on other relationships. It could be a number of things. Anything that you are growing to enhance your wisdom, your knowledge, and your understanding of something, right, that you're in or you want to go into. It could be an instrument. It could be music. It could be a number of things that can enhance your brain and make it grow, but you got to be an active participant. So how would you rate your training? Scale of 1 to 10. All right, second number. All right, so then third area, emotional. By the way, since we're in a pandemic, every day is an emotional day of training. It really is. Here's the thing, right? I tell it to you every week, right? What do the Special Operations Forces guys that I've interviewed on this show have said, right? Whether it's Delta Force, Navy SEALs, Green Berets. You know what they've said? They said all the same thing. You know what? You never rise to the occasion when you're under pressure. You only fall back to the level of your training when you're under fire. So the truth of the matter is when it comes to your emotional well-being, and there's a lot of stuff going on in our world right now, not just the pandemic. It comes down to two questions. One, how well are you able to control your emotions under this pressure and stress? It's one. That's your training every day. It's your training. How well are you controlling your emotions? And then two, right? How well are you able to truly understand the emotions of someone else? Can you really tap in and understand their emotions? Can you really understand what they're trying to say to you? Not just the words. I'm talking about what they're feeling behind them. And a lot of times the reason that we don't know those things is because we don't have the emotional vocabulary to be able to understand people. This gives you an opportunity to expand your emotional vocabulary. If you do those two things well, so that's part of your emotional training. So how would you rate yourself on your emotional training? Scale of 1 to 10, right? So then the last area, the spiritual area, right? The truth of the matter is when it comes to being spiritual, we all are spiritual. Whether you want to agree with me or not on that, the fact of the matter, it is, because there is something inside you that is unexplainable that causes us to persevere when we probably shouldn't persevere. We have faith in stuff that we can't see, but yet we believe that can happen or will happen because we've made plans in that way, even though it hasn't happened yet. We have something that tends to settle us in the midst of chaos. That's spiritual, right? Something that brings us back to center, something that it seems to be outside of ourselves that is unexplainable, right? That's being spiritual.
Got it.
For some people it's God, for some people it's meditation, for some people it's nature, for some it could be a number of things, right? Two questions when it comes to your training. Is it working? Is the first question. Is it working? Are you getting back to center of who you are? Are you getting back to a place of peace in the midst of chaos? Is it working? And then how faithful are you to it? To making sure that you're doing those things. Whether it's prayer or meditation or walking in nature or whatever it is for you. Are you being dedicated to it? How would you rate your training? So you got 4 areas, right? Those 4 areas are kind of like the legs of a chair. If the legs of the chair are uneven, makes your posture crooked, and that over time hurts us, immensely. And at the same time, if our chair legs are too low, we can't eat healthily, right? Which is also a problem for us. But speaking of someone, my friend, I get to call him friend. Gosh, it's so awesome to call him friend. His name is Dr. Michael J. Colburn. And I get to call him Michael. He's a performance improvement consultant, and he is an author. He has spent over 30 years of his career working with organizational leaders on implementing and sustainable change to improve performance of the organization, teams, and at individual levels. Michael has used his unique view of performance improvement to develop leaders, their workforce, and implement strategic plans to improve systems and processes. He is taught as lecturer at Department of Industrial and Systems Engineering, adjunct instructor at Colburn University, Capital University, and the list goes on and on and on. In Ohio, he's got all his degrees, right, including his PhD from The Ohio State University. We had a tough one the other night.
Thanks.
He lives with his wife Connie in Columbus, Ohio, and they spend time with 7 children, 11 grandchildren, and he is just awesome. And he's an avid tennis fan, and he's been to the U.S. Open in Wimbledon just to have some fun. Please welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to A New Direction, Dr. Michael Colburn. Welcome back, Michael.
Thank you. And we have to update my bio. I now have the 12th grandchild.
Really? Congrats. Oh, that's right. That's right. That's right.
Today, Aiden is 6 months old. He's my 12th. What
Wow.
a sweetie pie,
That's awesome.
And his mother, my youngest daughter, is an infectious disease doctor.
Okay.
At Ohio State. And so we pick up Aiden a number of times at childcare and when she's working late, which is a lot of people in medical area are doing.
Right.
We jump in there, and it's been a labor of joy.
That's
to
awesome.
see. It's really great to see your grandson each week.
That's awesome.
And I can't tell you, I'm just his name is Aiden Colburn. So you can update your bio on.
All right, we'll have to update. We will definitely update the bio on
Yeah,
because
easy.
now we've got Aiden, right? Yeah, we got 12. You got 12. You got a full
Yeah,
quiver.
yeah.
You got a
Good
full quiver
dozen,
there.
right?
So last time we were on the show, and by the way, #1 downloaded show in the
Wow.
history of A New Direction. Number one. And I mean, it's not close.
Wow.
I just want to let you know it's not close. So when we talked about this, we kind of talked about a how-to on Own Your Job, and we talked about some of the self-management principles that you have involved. We talked a little bit about the leadership aspect of it. But I started to think about, okay, so, all right, own my job, leadership, self-management. You know, why should that be important to me as an employee or anybody, you know, regardless of my job? Why should this be important to me?
You know, from an individual standpoint, you know, it's funny. I go back into my own history when I was, and I never used the word just but my first job where I had no formal leadership responsibilities, I found that I really enjoyed industrial engineering and I was good at it. And I found that my boss, great bosses, but didn't always know things. So I didn't want to put the burden of making decisions on what I do with my boss who may not know everything I can do. And I think one of the big whys, and this is just coming off the top of my head, is when we live a life of meaning, you know, we are taking the best of us to create something that goes beyond us. I think a purpose-filled life is really behind it all. And when I turn that over to somebody else to make that decision, I'm the only person that can really decide what is my purpose and what am I, when I leave this earth, what am I supposed to leave behind? And I think there is a big spiritual basis to this.
Mm-hmm. I agree. The thing that struck me as I was reading through this book again, and the second time and going through the notes, and you said something that's really profound, is that so often we let the job title determine our purpose rather than we taking charge of our purpose and redefining what that is.
Well put. I agree completely. You know, there's certain organizations that don't even have many job titles.
Right.
You know, and because sometimes the job titles get in the way.
Right.
The other thing, you know, people complain a lot about their organizations, and there's probably some good reasons for that. But you know, Jay, one thing I learned, particularly when I worked within an organization, as well as when I was a consultant organization, you know, I'd work with the leaders on how do you build a culture that brings out the best in people, that helps them grow as well as taking care of the needs of the customer. And I think that's really driving it. And I found that sometimes I'd be working with frontline people or anybody in the job, and I'd hear them complain about their boss or the restrictions they felt on themselves. And I really heard that and felt for them. But you know, Jay, the last thing I ever want to do is to help people embrace victimhood, which means, and basically giving up their ability and power to make their own way in this world. And that in the work world was a pretty big one. And so I would say to someone, they knew I knew the president of the company. So they would sometimes ask me they would give me an injustice and they'd say, you know, basically asking me to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say, well, you know, Jay, it sounds like you're having problems with your boss. And the trouble with that, Jay, is your boss isn't here. So I can't work with your boss. Let me suggest another approach. Let me work with you on working with your boss, you know? And I think to put the ownership back on them. Now, I want to be supportive of them.
Sure.
I want to help them. I don't want to just say, suck it up. But you know, you got to take responsibility. Right. And I've learned this in my own personal career, both as a engineer or a manager, as well as a consultant, what I've learned is the behavior of the job holder has much greater impact on the behavior of the boss than they think it is.
Right.
Go ahead. I had this one plant manager. I'll give you a quick story.
Sure.
In this glass company, it's the first time I had some responsibility. It was 1,000 miles from the home office. And if he would not make the manager's Hall of Fame. He did a lot of things wrong. And because he would berate people in front of other people and stuff like that. But he was a good person. And some of us, he would never do that to. We wouldn't let him do it to us, you know? And so I would come in, and he was a person who was not, he turned out to be one of my best bosses. He was not a mentor, and he did not give me clear expectations. And I was like 24 years old, 25 years old. And so I decided when I first interviewed with him, because I got a promotion to go down to this plant, when I first interviewed with him, he gave me really good information. He said, Michael, because I'd worked on some projects down there. He said, Michael, in this job, you're going to have to learn to say no to people. And one of those people might be me. I took him at his heart. So he come in and asked me to do something kind of dumb that wasn't helping the company, you know, or doing something that really wasn't the right way to do it. I was always prepared for it. And I found out that even though you might tick off people at times, when you're coming from a position of integrity and performance, you know, you need to open up your mouth. You need to open up your behaviors to take care of that. And he, in many ways, he was the best boss I ever had, even though he probably wasn't as great boss with other people, you know.
We're talking with Dr. Michael Colburn, author of Own Your Job. You know, one of the things in this book that you, and by the way, I'm not going to, I mean, I may quote a chapter for something like that if I see something like that, but, you know, the truth of the matter is you and I have kind of been down these roads. This book really starts out with that we have a higher purpose. And I was thinking about, I was in the gym probably, this is 3 or 4 years ago, 90-year-old man, 90 plus. He may have been 93. He was in the gym and he heard that I wrote books and asked me about my writing and those type of things. And I said, I'm really trying to help people find their purpose and their place and their passions in this world. And he looked at me and he said, I don't believe that people have purpose. Ooh. And my heart sank because he's 90. He's lived for 93 years on this planet evidently without a purpose. I don't know. I mean, if people are listening all over the world, right now to this show, you know, I guess the question I would want to ask them is, if you were to take a look at your job right now, do you know what your purpose is, and are you happy with that purpose?
Right.
I mean, because that's really kind of the crux of your book here is. Right. Because you're not talking to the CEO as much as you're talking to, I mean, you are, but I mean, really it's for whoever the job holder is, whatever that job is. And, you know, I opened up the show with saying, you know, so often so many people are saying, right? Right? And there's nothing that, as a psychological professional, there's probably nothing that kind of gets into my heart harder than when people say, well, you're not. Because what you've just said when you say I am just means that you feel that you have less value than anyone else, regardless of what their title or their job is.
Right.
But I think what you try to bring about in this book is that it doesn't matter. First of all, you're not a just and it doesn't matter because there is something bigger for you. But you kind of have to grab the bull by the. I'm going to use my farm boy acronym, but you're going to kind of have to grab the bull by the horns.
Absolutely. Because you're the only one that knows it, you know? And I found, you know, when we're talking about the tools, I found that like on the performance agreement, you know, it started out as being a process I used with companies, not with individuals. It was helping the company find out, what is your purpose? What is your mission? What is it that you contribute to the world?
Right.
And then all the benefits, profit, things like that will come after that.
Right.
It's like Dr. Deming, the famous Dr. Deming in quality. He said, focus first on quality and productivity will come along.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And in my experience as an engineer and as a consultant, 100% agree with that. Because if you learn to do that. So the process I came up with in the book started out working with companies. And so, and I find out the questions so I have them go out, like a company, I'll have them go out and talk to their customers. Don't send a survey out.
Right.
Go out and talk to them and ask them some questions, basically finding out what value do we need to create for you to make this a good relationship? What are your needs and expectations for us? And also, what do we do well? And how can we maybe leverage that? If you look at all the questions, have individuals talk about their internal customers, internal teammates, the same exact questions.
Love that.
And I think asking those questions about, what do I do well to create value for you? What are your needs and expectations? How can we really work together? I find that what comes out of that is more than a piece of paper.
Right. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
It comes out is there's a respectful relationship that we're on here today, everyone's saying we're all on the same team, and I hope we are. But by doing those things there, even people who I used to teach people how to do these interviews, and they'd be afraid to go out and talk to that person they had some problem with,
Right.
And I said, I've never lost a life yet, they never sent anyone back in a body sack,
Right.
But what surprises them, Jay? They'll come back to me and I said, I talked to so-and-so, maybe it was a team that they had to provide service to. And they are completely blown away of how well the interview went.
Wow.
Because I say, when you ask a question, there's only 2 follow-up questions you can ask. So I'm talking to you about what are your needs and expectations for me?
Right.
And the follow-up questions are, can you elaborate on that? Can you tell me more?
Right.
Can you clarify what you mean by quality? And even if they say something completely wild, the only thing you say is thank you.
That's awesome.
So people are used to people coming back, right?
Yeah.
And that is disarming to people, but it's also they figure out and says this person really wants to know,
right?
And that person that was an SOB working with them last week on that project now becomes someone who spill their guts out to you in the best sense of the word, and shares information and are much more flexible and sensible than we give them credit for.
His name's Dr. Michael Colburn. The book is entitled Own Your Job. It's more than that. It's taking lead. It's finding your passions, finding your purpose. You're listening to him here on A New Direction. Hey, folks, listen, I'm going to tell you something. I've got these great sponsors, Epic Physical Therapy, who is opening places all over the Research Triangle Park. By the way, they work with professional athletes? Yeah, professional athletes come from all over the world to go specifically to Epic Physical Therapy. Why? Because they're just that good. Seriously, it's where I go. It's where, I still train. I think I'm 20 something. Clearly my body is not. And it tells me that every day in the aches and pains that I have. And so I have to go see them. And I have to go see Heidi and Andrew, who own Epic Physical Therapy, and their team. It's an elite team. They understand your needs. Trust me, they do. If you just want to even move and feel a little better, Lee's there and she can help you stretch and work on some of your building some muscle and getting you better and more fit. You know what? They understand the need to treat the entire body as a functional whole, not just your symptoms or your injury. That's been my experience. That's been everyone's experience. So when you're ready for epic relief, epic recovery, and epic results, don't look any further. Don't start anywhere else. Start with my friends at Epic Physical Therapy. You can learn more by going to epicpt.com. That's EPICPT.com. And Linda Craft and Team Realtors. You know what? For over 35 years, yes, over 35 years, they've stayed at the top of the real estate game. How do you do that? Most companies are done before 30. Well, she understood, and back in the 80s, this is the mid-80s, when interest rates were like 18%, for those of you who are old enough to remember that. So here's the deal. She understood that the most powerful thing that she has in her control is relationships. more so than clever marketing or clever ads and all that. Develop the relationship. Understand what's really important. Understand that, you know what? Every home is filled with memories, more so than dollars. And then she built her team on those principles that we are going to take pride in every single relationship. We're going to focus on this place that's created all these amazing memories, right? Because you listen, for all of us who have grandparents, I can still remember my grandparents' house. I can still remember it. I can still remember every memory. It seems like in there, right? It's that powerful. And that's been how many years? So listen, when you're ready to go with the memory maker, when you're ready to go with the relationship maker, the one whose customers say that she is a legend in customer service, talk to Linda Craft and team when it comes to your real estate needs. It's really simple. Just go to lindacraft.com. That's LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction, and we were with Dr. Michael Colburn and his book, Own Your Job. But before we went here on break a little bit, there was something that struck me that I wanted to kind of take a stab at as we're talking about these whys and why I should do this. And I'm just, I'm wondering if there's people, when you start saying, you're going to have these interviews, I wonder if I know there are. I'm not wondering. I know that there are people who are ready to come up with the following excuses. And so I'm going to play a little bit of a devil's advocate with you with some phrases that you've probably heard 6,000 or a million times. I am not going to do an interview with my boss. If you expect me to take ownership of my job by interviewing my boss and expecting me to, serve after the way he or she has treated me, Doc, you need to get checked in. What do you say to that one?
So what's your alternative?
What a great answer.
And the other thing is that I tell a story sometimes. When I went to school, especially went back to graduate school, I would love to have a great professor. However, I was not going to let the quality of the professor impact my learning.
Right.
Same thing with the boss. I look back in my career as having bosses. I've had a couple really good ones, one really bad one, and everyone else in between. I'm not going to let the quality of my boss affect my performance. That's really my answer. If you're turning it over to the boss, and I'm even going to say everything you say about the boss is probably correct, but I can't do anything about that. If you allow that to affect your performance, it's your problem.
Right. There's another piece to all of this that you talk about and that you actually kind of referenced is, our customer. And, I can hear people right now who say, well, I just work in reception. I'm just a receptionist. I really don't have customers, so to speak. I really don't have a vendor, so to speak. So I don't really have a customer, Doc.
Of course you do. Matter of fact, there's two things that kind of came up from this. I always ask people, I always define people in an organization. So you do have customers, because a customer is anybody you provide a product or service to, whether it's information, whether it's a physical product or not. So I ask him, and I'll have him draw a circle. And I'll put your name in it and your position in it, and I have lines off of that circle. Who are the people you deal with on a daily basis? Some of them are people who directly receive your service. Some of them are people that you work with to get a service, and other people are people who provide resources to you. Oh, and by the way, your boss probably isn't your customer. Your boss is probably your supplier.
Ah.
Now, they still have a responsibility
right.
Of accountability. So I'm not saying that. And so the interesting thing that you bring up with being the receptionist, And so who are your customers? Who do you talk to all the time? Well, people come in, who are clients or vendors or things like that. And then they're getting information back to other people. And I just ask them to uh, identify those key relationships. And I'll use that term. Then I'll say, well, what is it that you provide them? You know,
Mm.
and what value are you creating for them? And everybody can answer that question. I've never had anyone that can answer that question. Never, never.
So I had an interesting, I had an interesting thought process come up, and I want to get your thoughts on this because you said, well, your boss may not be your customer, but I want to push back a little bit if you're okay, because I'm kind of wondering if he isn't. And matter of fact, I'm going to kind of wonder if he's not my number one customer, because ultimately, if I'm serving the company in the right way, am I not ultimately serving who my boss is? And if wherever I'm at in the chain of command is I'm delivering some sort of a product or a service, isn't my service to whoever I directly report to, isn't it to that person who either signs my checks or, has a piece of my job? I've always said about my marriage, my number one customer in my marriage is my wife.
Okay.
Right? She's my number one customer. If I take care of my number one customer, right? And I've thought about this in terms of jobs too, and I was thinking about this in your book. If my boss is my number one customer, and if I thought of him that way, would my job be a little bit better or a lot better?
Well, let me push back a little bit on that one.
Good.
The only one that I would say that would be, you might have an administrative assistant who provides services to the boss.
Sure.
That might be the customer.
Okay.
But otherwise, if I'm ultimately, whatever we do in an organization has to create value for the ultimate customer outside. So what I ask people to do is, what's the chain between you and that outside person? And that's your internal customer.
Mm.
And maybe there's certain situations where the boss might be it, but typically it isn't so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, so the question is, what is the role in a self-managed culture between a job holder and their direct manager?
Okay.
And I would say that it's even better than the customer thing. You're partners in performance, because the job of a manager, a leader, and I had this, is to remove obstacles from people's performance. So when you use the tools that I teach, I find it becomes a much more closer partnership, that they have together in service of something that's beyond both of them. Mm-hmm. And I would even suggest with you and your wife, the way you treat her and you think of her, that you two are partners in whatever you're doing. And there's a mutual accountability. So there is an accountability, and it's not that we dismiss the boss, but we see them in a different light. We see them as partners.
Yeah, I think no, I get what you're saying. I clearly do, but I wonder. There's a part of me that still wants to hold on to this, going, you know what? If I know that my job is to serve. At the end of the day, right? That's my job, is to serve. That still ruminates in my brain. You talk about 3 essentials for owning your job, and you make a couple of comments. One is your professional life is important, but that's not your whole life. That's the first thing that you make right up front. But then you say the first essential, and I think this is where we get stuck, is you said the first essential is proactivity. And I think so often that we just wait for change to happen. But somewhere we've got to, how do we get people to, because I'm asked this question a lot as a coach, how do I get people to be more proactive, right? And I have, of course, my answers, but what do you do in your system to help people become more proactive in owning their job, stepping up to be a leader in their job, being better in their service?
Well, first, I want to make sure that the person understands what proactive means.
Okay.
It's more than just taking initiative. Sometimes people will use those two terms. interchangeably. It's really more than that. In my view, proactivity is the ability to make choices. That's the fundamental piece. Going back to Stephen Covey, remember Stephen Covey?
Oh gosh, yes.
Circle of so he said there's a circle of concern. Those are the things. That's all the stuff that's going on in our world, right around us. It could be in your job or just in the world. And some of the stuff there that if you feel kind of difficult or frustrated because there's a lot of stuff going on that you can't do anything about.
Right.
Then Stephen also talked about there's a smaller circle in there. It's called a circle of influence. That's the stuff that you care about or it's important to you that you can do something about. So what I have found, because that's in the first chapter of my book, I find what happens when you find yourself in a situation where you can't do anything about it, apparently, where you don't feel like you can even make choices. So there's three fundamental questions that we have to ask. Not what is wrong. Why do I feel so bad I can't do anything? So what is it you care about that's causing you this frustration? Well, I care about my children. I care about success of the organization. I care about a whole bunch of stuff. Then the second question is a powerful question. So what can you do about that? Jay, people can always answer that question. I always say a small can is better than a big cannot.
That's so true.
And then what happens is, and I tell stories in my book about that. And then the third question, which is the most powerful question after that, is of all the cans, what will I do? And I think the word will is powerful because that is ownership.
Right.
And so by going from the frustration to the can to the will, you can translate things into action. And that's a powerful feeling you have. And what happens is when I do that, because I get the same feelings everybody else does.
Right.
When I do that, it tends to, remember the Covey's circle, it tends to make that circle of influence grow.
Here's the thing about those three questions, and I love these three questions, and I hope people wrote these down, and I'm going to kind of review them again. But I think one of the things that happens in these three questions that we need to ask to get inside our circle of influence, that first question, what do I care about? I think you got to get honest, first of all, with that.
Right.
And even if it sounds selfish, you have got to be honest with, if you say, you know what I care about? I care about me and what I want. And if that's, I think you have to get down to that level of honesty, being able to look at yourself. I mean, if that's what it is, it's what it is, right? And so, right. I mean, I think we have to be really honest with, if you care about money and that's what you care about, then that's what you care about. This isn't, we're not talking about something bigger and magnanimous that is ethereal and out there. We're talking about just being, okay, what is it that you really care about? And then what can I do? I think this is a place where people got to get honest too, because they short-side themselves so quickly because they immediately go, well, there's nothing, because their amygdala gets hijacked in the middle of their brain, their emotions take over, and they go, there's nothing I can do. Nothing I can do. Nothing. I'm stuck here, right? That's not the question. The question is, okay, well, what can you do, right? And people shut down. I have had clients, coaching clients, who, will say, throw up their arms and go, I don't know what to do anymore. And I'll say, well, what can you do? I can't do anything. I mean, it's like it's a reflex action.
Right. Well, that's why the first question is important, is have a real discussion about what's really important to you, what you really care about. And I really find that deep down in people, I feel bad about that 90-year-old person that you.
I do too.
Deep down in people, unless you have some really deep psychological problems,
right,
people can discover something beyond themselves. And what happens is the person who says, well, I only care about money, what they have is they have a very small universe around them, right? That circle is, it goes out 3 feet from them. And I'm not sure if someone is in that situation, I can help them that much at that point, except to have them think through, have them question their own values.
Right.
So how does that make you feel? And I'm not a psychologist and I'm not a therapist,
Right.
but in many ways, I feel I'm a therapist for the fundamentally healthy person.
Well, I think you're more than that. I think you're self-shorting yourself there because, I mean, listen, as a psychological professional, I'm just saying to you that this book is, I think, one of the most healthy for people, regardless of where they're at on the scale, right? I think what happens with anyone is even as someone who has done therapy, I can only help you so far. You've got to kind of help me too. I mean, at the end of the day, you got to do your part. I can't just fix you, right? I'm not a surgeon here, okay, that can repair a bone or, do some internal surgery. The best that I can do is I can get you to a place, but you got to meet me part of the way, right? I mean, and that's really what you're talking about here.
Exactly. And it's being brutally honest, because by being brutally honest with people, and if it's done in their best interest, it might sting them a little bit, but at the same time, because I guess I believe that deep down, most people they haven't let that purpose in their life quite bubble up.
Right.
What is it that really brings meaning to your life, and what's really important to you? What is it that brings joy to you? And if you can answer those questions, all of a sudden that circle start getting a little bit bigger, and then one of the things I ask people to do when I'm working with them on the preliminary stuff before I even get to the interviews, one thing I found, there's a lot of good assessments out, and I use a lot of myself, but I have one thing. I ask people to write a success story.
Hold on to that thought. We're going to do a teaser right here, right? Okay. We're going to do a teaser on writing your success story, because we're going to talk about that. You're listening to Dr. Michael Colburn and his book, Own Your Own Job, and it's so much more than that right here on A New Direction. Hey, everyone, Epic Physical Therapy. They offer the most advanced, top-of-the-line equipment, including things like the Ultra G anti-gravity treadmill, the Normatec compression sleeves, which is kind of cool. The Game Ready, I talk about a lot. Ice cold water, reduce the swelling. Oh, I love it. And then, you know what? They are trained and certified in the most comprehensive cutting-edge treatments available. Things like blood flow restriction therapy, dry needling, cupping. You know what? They're just trained. They're awesome. They're amazing. I'm just telling you, they really are. And they get me getting back to where I need to be. So when you're ready for your epic relief, epic recovery, epic results, go where the pros go. Go where everybody goes. Go start with Epic Physical Therapy. You can learn more by going to epicpt.com. That's Epic. That's EPICPT.com. And Linda Kraft and Team Realtors for over 35 years. The top of the real estate game. You know what they do? They've done relationships with their clients. Matter of fact, Linda's first client back in 1985, first client, still comes to see her. First client. Why does your first client from 36 years ago continually come to see you on a regular basis? Well, it's not because they've sold the home for 36 years every year. It's because there's something that goes beyond the home, and it was her and the relationship that she created. And that's why her clients keep coming back. That's why her clients keep referring. That's why, regardless of where you're at in the world, she can actually help you, because she is independently owned and operated and is connected to the best professionals, not part of the company, because she is her own company, but the best professionals wherever you're at in the world. So when you're ready to sell your home, buy your home, start with the relationship maker, the one that her past clients say she's a legend when it comes to customer service. Talk to Linda Kraft and Team Realtors. You can learn more by going to lindakraft.com. That's LINDACRAFT.com. So we're back here on A New Direction, and we're with Dr. Michael Colburn, and we did a little teaser here because I love, I do a talk that I've done at several places called, More Than a Story, An Unexpected Life, Be Your Own Hero. And when you started this whole thing on this story, the stories are extraordinarily powerful. So I'm going to let you go. Let's talk about, the stories and how we get that started, what we need to do, and how we should be thinking about that.
Well, one thing is before I ever get him into the tools, and if you notice the first 2 or 3 chapters of the book, we don't talk about any tools at all.
Right.
And it's really dealing with what you've been bringing up here in terms of, because I think we have to acknowledge and accept our own strengths and values.
Oh, yeah.
What's important to us, because it's a strength-based approach. I think overcoming weaknesses sometimes can be a waste of time. Accepting our limitations is important.
Well, there was a whole movie with Clint Eastwood. I can't remember which one of the Dirty Harrys it was, but he ends the movie with, "A man's got to know his limitations," right? I mean, that's the because the truth of the matter is you can only bring your weaknesses up so much, right? I mean, and it becomes such a waste of time because I got to be better at my weakness. You can only do so much with that. So focus on your strengths. So I'm right with you on this one, Doc.
Oh, so the one thing I found is when I'm starting to work with somebody, and I say, well, I want you to write a story. And I have them do this on a series of times. Tell me, write a story about something you really did well, you feel real good about. It could have happened last week. It could have happened 10 years ago. It could have been something when you were a kid. Just write that story, and don't write a generalized story. Give me specific things. Okay. What did you do? And I have them write that. And then I have them write another. I just have them write a series of stories about things they were successful about. And I said, it doesn't even have to be work. It could be anything. And then I have them look at those stories, and that's all I say. Then I have them look at those stories, and I said, now detach yourself from them. Let's say you're reading this about somebody else. What are you seeing coming out of these stories? And I'll say, every time I'm successful, there's certain themes that keep coming up, And those themes are very often talents, and very often talents that we're even kind of almost unaware of, And I want them to discover those talents and turn them into strengths, And when we're most satisfied with our work, it's when has less to do with the company. It has more to do, am I able to use my strengths to achieve my purpose? And I teach them how to do a content analysis of their own words and underline things. And I'll look at them too. So if they miss something, I'll say, Jay, everything you're saying is good, but I saw something else there that I haven't heard you talk about, Every time you're successful, there's something about how you interacted with certain interpersonal skills that I'm not sure if you're even aware of, And so, and out of that's a really uplifting thing, because it is truly and honest, and it's their own stories to do that. Then when I have them interview some of their people, even before the interviews, I say, go and talk to people who know you and ask them, what do I do well? What am I good at? And that's an uplifting thing. So that helps kind of overcome that feeling of I can't do anything, because they've already identified things that they were very successful at. And so having them being aware of their strengths and their passions is the first step, because if we can't get beyond that, all the tools I'm going to teach won't do any good at all.
Listen, I have interviewed a lot of people who've talked about talents on the show. And they say something very similar to what you just said. And they'll even take it a step further. So often we don't even recognize our talent because we're so nonchalant about them.
Absolutely.
We don't think they're a talent because it comes so easy.
Right.
Regardless of what it is, right? I mean, if this show, and I'm not, please people, I'm not bragging, but this show, I should have known, because it's natural for me. I have never taken a broadcasting class. I have never taken any sort of interviewing class. I've never taken anything, ever. I've never run a studio. I have been on the radio, but I've never done this before. this comes so natural to me, and people can't see it, but there are 3 monitors, 2 computers, and a board right in front of me here, and I am handling all of this stuff myself, and I'm loving it. And there's a big sign in front of me that says, have fun.
That's great.
Right? And here's what I didn't realize. When I went back through my story, and I did this, I went back and I wrote my story, I started to find themes that were like, do you remember when you and your friends used to play TV announcers? Do you remember being an actor on stage? Do you remember, right? Throughout my entire life, there was all of this stuff of being in front of audiences, being in front of audiences, being in front of audiences. And then there was this, you were always a learner. You always loved to read. You always loved to do it. It was just part of your natural talent. I can't go to school to learn to read. I mean, you do maybe when you're in grade school, but nobody puts that passion in you to want to read a book like Own Your Own Job. Nobody does that. But when I went back and I started looking, that's when the talents emerged. And when we are doing what we're talented for, and this is exactly what you're saying, when we are doing what fits within our talents, man, we're happy.
Absolutely. And without it, we may work hard and get by, but I tell you, I told one person, remember, I had an interview, my first podcast interview I had before I even talked to you, and I said, a comment to this guy says, I can't remember a bad day I had at work. I remember some tough moments,
right,
and some struggles, but I can't remember that. So I'm the luckiest guy in the world who is actually gets to do things that is fun. When I first started writing the book, before I knew I was going to write the book, and I was writing about this stuff, the first line that came out to me was this: work ought to be fun.
Yeah.
I feel so bad for people who say, thank God it's Friday,
Yeah.
Now, there's nothing wrong with, I love to play and all that sort of thing there, but I love my job, and I'm not a workaholic,
Right.
and I think that helping people to find out what their true love is in their work and everything else, and those other areas that in your work that you come up with, you start every show with, when you find your passions in each one of those and your own uniqueness about that, that is fun. And when you're having fun, that's when you're creative, and that's when you kind of get beyond your ego, because you don't need the ego feeding, because you're living the life you're supposed to live, right?
Right. Yeah, you're doing what you're supposed to. You know that you're doing what you're supposed to do.
Right. And I feel bad for people who don't feel that way. And so by helping them discover their talents and strengths, and you're absolutely right, a talent are those underlying things that happen that make you a good broadcaster. The talent isn't being a broadcaster. The talent is all the stuff that makes you a good broadcaster, right?
Right.
Like a great golfer, a Tiger Woods' talent is not golfing.
Right.
Eye head coordination. There might be a whole bunch of stuff that bubbles up into golfing, right?
Right.
And I found out myself, someone asked me, if you weren't doing what you were doing now, what would you be doing? If you just pick a couple other jobs.
Right.
I took it as, okay, I have to do something that I'm talented at, not something I'd like to be talented at.
Right.
And I came up with 2 items, which kind of surprised me. If I weren't doing what I'm doing now, I would either be a research scientist, because I'm very good at diagnostics.
Right.
Or I'd be a stand-up comedian.
Do you know I did stand-up comedy?
I used to. Well,
I wasn't very good at it, but I did it.
Comedy. Well, I did. When I was in my when I got my bachelor's degree, first 2 years is pre-engineering, and then 3 years your specialty. So I was in small class. I went from a big university, a high state university, to a small college called Industrial Engineering Department. And so we had 12 minutes between classes. And of course, getting across the campus, you're lucky to get there. But I only had to work from one room to the other. So between classes, I used to do stand-up routines about the faculty. And I would entertain my class because some of them had there are certain things that were just easy to do,
Right.
and I'd do about a 10-minute thing between classes on the professor that was going to come in, and then they asked me, we had a banquet every year. So then I became with some other people the entertainment of the banquet.
Right.
That was so much fun. And I used to write, even in my first work, I used to write songs, parodies of songs that were. Like one was, if I said, remember I had a hammer,
Yes,
if I had a stopwatch, and I had things like that. But it was so much fun, and humor is part of my life, and it comes out of my family.
right.
We had a very humorous family, and I find and teaching, I never try to be humorous, but it always happens, So anyway,
I wondered. You just said something here that just triggered something. I wonder if you and I have a book in us that focuses on, if you're not laughing at your job, there's something wrong.
That's a great title of one. Something.
If you're not laughing and you're in your job, there's something wrong. Because I have been in places where there is just no laughter because certain people or bosses or whatever have made things so strict, or it's become so structured that they don't allow laughter. And I know that you put in this book, you have talked about in this book, that there should be laughter, there should be joy, there should be happiness, there should be in your job. I wonder if there's something in there, Mike, that
I think so. That I tell you, that would be fun to collaborate on and write on.
Yeah, because
there's something there, right? And I had one situation when I was working my first job, and it was very hierarchical type of. It was a manufacturing company, very hierarchical, but I learned a lot. And so our boss, which was a great department head, about once a month we'd have a meeting of all of us, but it wasn't your typical staff meeting. He would let kind of anybody make a presentation on anything they want to do, or they're learning. And so, especially as young guys, we'd come up with things, different ways to collect data or different ways to analyze things. And so I did one where I came up with a whole different way to collect information data. It was much more efficient. And the boss really liked it, and he took it to his boss, and they asked me to be part of a team to write a manual on what I did. And so we had different people from plants to come together and writing a manual based on this thing I came up with. And so I was kind of the lead person on it. We wrote this manual, and then they finally passed it out. This was a very hierarchical company, and they said they're only going to give it to full industrial engineers. At that time, I was a junior industrial engineer, so I was ineligible to get a copy of the book I wrote. As a matter of fact, my boss gave it to me. He says, well, and they let me know, says, we're giving you this copy because you wrote it, but not because your position, Now most people would get ticked off at that, right?
Right.
Let me tell you how I handled it. I wrote a song, a parody. Remember the Green Beret?
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, I do remember
the Green Beret.
Right.
Right. So I wrote the Ballad of the Green Beret. I said the Ballad of the Green Manual because it was all in the Green Manual. So I wrote the Ballad of the Green Manual, and because that was my way. So I took something that it kind of ticked me off, and I made a parody of it, and I showed it to the other, to many of the engineers around,
That's
especially
awesome.
the young guys that like that. That was my way of coping, and it was kind of funny because first thing, it had nothing to do with me, really, right? Is the organization was very tight and stuff like that, Wow. And so I found myself doing that. And my guess is you have stories like that yourself, in terms of how you dealt with things.
I do, but the problem is we've been on an hour.
Obviously, time management is one of your strengths.
No, time management is not a talent that I have. That's absolutely true. But this has gone fast as always. It's so good to have you on.
I love talking with you.
I love talking with you. You've done this before, right? It's called A New Direction. If you can leave people with a new direction, what would be a new direction from Dr. Michael Colburn, author of Own Your Job? What would be your new direction for the folks?
It's just for them or for me?
For them. If you could leave them with a new direction,
right,
based on Own Your Own Job, what would you leave them with?
first thing I would leave them with is to acknowledge and embrace your talents and strengths, because that's the only thing that's going to get you ahead. And not this false modesty, but acknowledge that, in the Bible they say love your neighbor as yourself. That presumes you love yourself. It's not selfish, and I think to be able to love yourself gives you the opportunity to give out to other people, and then answer the question: what is it that makes me laugh? What is it that brings me joy? And I was telling you about my new grandson. I mean that is a joyful thing. And even when he's kind of crying and stuff like that, what I found was joyful. And I'm talking about myself. I'm finding I was carrying him the other night around my shoulder, and I felt him relax. He didn't go to sleep. He just relaxed. That is a moment of joy.
Yeah.
He was so comfortable with me holding him in terms of doing that. So find your talents and strength, acknowledge them, and then just ask yourself one question: what can I do in my current job that will emphasize this strength more?
Awesome.
Just one thing.
That's awesome.
That's what I leave for him.
It's awesome. His name's Dr. Michael Colburn. Book is entitled Own Your Job. Folks, you know what I say? Be inspired, because when you're inspired, that means you can inspire others. And when they're inspired, that means they'll inspire others in turn. You know what? And that's going to make this world a great place. I promise you it will. I'm going to be back next week. Another great guest with another great book. You know what it's going to be? Another great show. See? Just how it happens. And you know what, as I say to you every week, right? Ciao, everybody.
You lost your confidence and the answers don't make sense. You got to keep your hope alive. You got to know you can survive. This is your time to fly. A new direction, a brand new day. A new direction, things are gonna change. To go a different way, yeah. The time has come. Your dreams will take you places you have never been before. Find your passion, find your strength.